Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name's Ivana Harinkiw if you're new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is Tuesday, May the 17th, and I am joined today by what might be a familiar face to you if you have been paying attention to AL.com and our publications for the last couple of years. Today, I am joined by sports writer Kevin Scarbinksy. Now, Kevin worked with Alabama Media Group for years, and he is actually back writing a weekly column in the Sunday edition of The Lead. The Lead is a daily digital publication that has local news, sports, obituaries, puzzles, and comics, excuse me. We're going to leave links here so you can subscribe to The Lead and learn more about The Lead. But again, Kevin is back with that Sunday column in The Lead, returning there with those columns that I know many of you missed. Now, if you missed Kevin's column this past weekend, it did run on AL.com yesterday, and that is because this had an important message in it. Kevin, I'm not going to spoil that. I will let you talk about your journey and what has happened to you over the past year or so. But first, I want to talk a little bit about your relationship and your friendship with the former SEC Commissioner, Mike Slive. So first, tell us a little bit about Mike and you getting to know Mike while you were writing and working with the SEC, reporting on the SEC, and then how that kind of source type relationship evolved into more of a friendship.
Well, first of all, Ivana, good morning, and thank you for having me on the show. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm especially glad any chance I get to talk about Mike Slive. I got to know Mike years and years ago because he was the commissioner of what started out as the Great Midwest Conference, later became Conference USA, and UAB was a charter member of the conference. And Mike loved all sports, but he loved basketball. So he would come to UAB basketball games at Bartow Arena, and we would hang out, we would talk. I love basketball. That's my favorite sport. Don't tell the football fans. I love football, but I really, really love basketball and baseball. So Mike and I would hang out, we would talk, we got to know each other, and we stayed in touch through the years. And I was really excited to see him become the commissioner of the SEC because I knew what kind of person he was, not just what kind of leader he was, but I'd really gotten to know him somewhat as a person. But still, in terms of my relationship with him, as a journalist, you always try to maintain some professional distance. You want to get close to people, but not too close. It's built into our genes, into our DNA. You just want to make sure that you don't cross a certain line, so people can trust what you're writing, what you're telling them, that you're not doing it out of personal interest or personal favor because you have a personal relationship with someone. And I maintained that hard line for a long, long time. Started to soften as I got later in my career, in my journalism career. And Mike was really the person that helped change that for me. I would go to breakfast with him at Salem's Diner in Homewood. He was so popular there. He had his own booth, had a little bronze plaque above the booth that said Mike Slive's booth. And he would love to eat breakfast there every morning. And the movers and shakers of college athletics from across the country that would come visit with him was amazing. So through those breakfasts, through those personal conversations, I became to see him more than the most powerful man in intercollegiate athletics, which he was, more than the commissioner of the SEC, more than someone I could go to for information to help understand a subject, but truly as a friend. And I was incredibly honored. He went through 2 battles with prostate cancer. And back in the 90s when medicine was primitive compared to today. And then about 2014, which coincided with the launch of the SEC network, made it very difficult for him. And we didn't know the extent of what he was suffering at the time. But a couple of years later, as he was retiring as SEC commissioner, he had decided that he was going to lend his name to a foundation for prostate cancer research. And he wanted me, I felt so honored, to write the original story about the foundation, about his own personal journey. And I'll never forget sitting down with him and his daughter, Anna Slive Harwood, who is now the executive director of the foundation, and talking about what he had gone through. People had no idea. He had 2 back surgeries to have rods inserted into his back so he could walk normally. That's the kind of pain that he was in as a result of his prostate cancer. So I was able to write that story in 2017. And unfortunately, a year later, Mike passed away from complications from prostate cancer. And the anniversary was yesterday. The 4-year anniversary of his death was yesterday, May 16th.
Well, and we know as well, though, that Mike Slive's name and his legacy has lived on through this foundation, which, again, you mentioned his daughter Anna currently runs. And a big message of that foundation is to get men to be tested for prostate cancer, to get the word out and to say, look, this can happen to anybody. It happened to Mike, who many men might regard as a giant, as you said, in sports. And you think if it can happen to him, it can happen to anybody. So one of the foundation's big messages there, and one that Anna pushes as well, is for people to get tested. And that message actually kind of hit close to home for you, didn't it, Kevin?
It really did. And, this is so true. It's a stereotype because it's true. Guys don't talk about these kind of things. We don't always take care of our health. We don't always see doctors regularly, just in general for health and wellness, let alone when we might actually need them. And I fell into that category. I had been tested. I'd had my PSA blood test before, and it's a simple blood test. It's all it is. It's no problem. It's easy. It's just the kind of thing you give blood for all the time. So I'd been tested before, but I didn't really have any symptoms other than, well, I'll be frank, I had to pee a lot. I had to know where the bathrooms were in a stadium or an arena or on the road if I was traveling to a game, a practice, whatever it might be. But even that's normal as you get older. That doesn't necessarily mean you have prostate cancer. It's something that you deal with as a man as you get older. Well, after Mike passed, and that continued for me, that condition continued for me, and I thought, I really should get tested. I really just to be sure, just to see what's going on. And I went to my urologist, fantastic doctor. And this was, I don't know, the winter, December or so of 2020. Well, my PSA test came back and the number was, there's a normal range. My number was well above the normal range. So he recommended we do a follow-up test. We did another test, tested positive. Another test, tested positive. They finally did a biopsy and they confirmed that I had prostate cancer. So now we're into the winter, spring of 2021. And so I realized, he said, look, at your age, I just turned 60 in the last year. He said, you're still young, you're still relatively healthy. We do the surgery. Hopefully it hasn't spread. We take it out and you can live a long and healthy life beyond this. And, I have two sons. They're 19 and 17. My older son had just started his first year at the University of Florida. He was in his senior year of high school as this was going on. He was getting ready to go to Florida. And so my wife and I discussed it and decided it was the best thing to do. We didn't tell many people. We didn't even tell our sons at first exactly why I was having surgery. So scheduled it for typical in my life. We scheduled it for the week after the SEC football media days last July. I covered those for the SEC as a freelance writer. Had the surgery. Everything went great. No complications. Very few side effects or after effects. I see my doctor regularly. Get get tested just to be sure. The cancer had not spread. Thank the Lord, had not spread. They were able to get it all. And I feel, I'm happy. I'm healthy. It's 10 months later. I'm playing basketball with my sons in the backyard. But it all goes back to because I got tested. If I hadn't got tested, no one can say for sure what would have happened, but I don't like to think of the possibilities of what would have happened if I hadn't got tested. And at the heart of why I got tested is my family, of course, but the memory and the friendship I had with Mike Slive, and knowing what he went through, and knowing that his mission in his retirement was to make men come out of the closet, if you will, or not come out of the shadows is a better phrase I should use. Come out of the shadows. This is where prostate cancer is where breast cancer was maybe 25 or 30 years ago. It wasn't something everyone talked about. Now, obviously in the month of October, you can't turn your head without seeing someone wearing pink to help raise awareness, to help raise funds for research. And that's fantastic. Well, we need to do that for men in prostate cancer. And that was Mike Slive's mission. And I'm glad that in some small way, I may have helped contribute to that by getting tested, going through what I went through. but now sharing my story. And let me tell you, it wasn't easy to decide to share my story. It's still one of those things. It's a little uncomfortable to talk about.
Well, it is, and I can only imagine that it is, I should say. But here you are on, a live video feed talking about it. You did obviously work up the courage to do that and to write this column for the Lead again that is now on AL.com to share that as well. And I think you said something interesting I want to rewind to, and that was that you said you don't know what would have happened if you did not get tested. But I like to think that if you had not gotten tested, and God knows what would have happened, but as things unfolded, I would imagine you would be thinking, Mike must be so mad at me for not catching this early on. Is that kind of what was going through your head? Like, oh gosh, Mike, I did it. I promise. I took care of it early. Don't be mad at me.
I did. And I do think of him. I do think of him often, with all the changes going on in college athletics these days with name, image, and likeness and the transfer portal and people, thinking the sky is falling and it'll never be the same again. I've often thought, what would Mike think about this? What would Mike say about this? What would be his reaction? What would be his counsel to Greg Sankey, his successor, who's done a fantastic job at the SEC? Because again, Mike was a leader, not just of the SEC, but across the country when it came to college athletics. And he had a unique combination of powerful ideas, but a personal touch. I talked to his daughter, Anna, yesterday on the anniversary of his death. And we had a wonderful conversation. It was a little emotional. And she said to this day, she still hasn't read all of the letters that people wrote to her and to Mike's wife, Liz, and his mom about how he touched their lives personally. Because it wasn't just generic, she said. It was unbelievable how specific every letter was. Mike did this for me. Mike said this to me that helped me in a difficult time. Mike did that for me, Ivana. I was looking, I had contemplated for some time moving away from daily journalism and finding something else I wanted to do, something else I wanted to accomplish. And Mike, I went to Mike for counsel along those lines. And it's part of why I ended up leaving AL.com and working with the Coach Safely Foundation, the National Council of Youth Sports, and pouring my passion and my energy and talents into youth sports and trying to make that as safe and inviting and accessible an area as possible. So, but that's due in part to my friendship with Mike and going to him. And again, his ability to know the right thing to say to help set you on the right path. And so, yes, in a darker moment, or maybe a dark humor moment, I might think, man, if I hadn't gotten tested, just let's say the worst happened, I could see myself, and I hope I would see myself where Mike is in the afterlife, and Mike would say, you dummy, what's the matter with you? Why didn't you get tested? After all we talked about, after everything I went through, why didn't you get tested? And that would be my message to everyone, every man over the age of 40. Don't think about me. Think about Mike Slive and what he went through and how strong he was. And he passed at 77. Get tested. Extend your life. Do it for the people that you care about the most.
Well, and you mentioned, again, getting away from daily journalism. Again, you didn't get away too long. We've roped you back into weekly journalism, at least there. But Kevin, you're a big name around Birmingham and in Alabama with sports journalism. People know who you are. So maybe while you don't consider yourself to be Mike Slive level of maybe people recognizing, right? People do know your name, and you do have influence among local people, local men who have read your columns for years there. So if somebody decides to go get tested and you are the reason, they say, you know what, maybe I'm kind of having the same symptoms that Scarbinsky did, and what's it going to hurt to go get tested? How does that make you feel? And is that why you decided to come out and share the story?
That is why I did it, Ivana. Ultimately, to try to encourage others to get tested. Because it's simple. Like I said, it's a blood test. But the difference it can make in your life and the lives of the people that you love, in my case, my wife, my sons, my dad, my brother, my close friends, you make an influence. Sometimes we don't realize the influence we have on other people's lives. And so that was ultimately why I decided to write that column. Like I said, it wasn't easy. There's still a little bit of embarrassment, that you went through this. And so what really sparked me though, was I got a letter from the Mike Slive Foundation last week. Of course, I'm on their mailing list, and they send out occasional fundraising solicitations. But this was different. This was, and I don't always read them, but I opened this one, and it was written by Anna, Mike Slive's daughter. It was so touching and so personal. And the one thing that jumped out at me was she said, of all the things about her father you could say, all of it, his legacy, his accomplishments, what he meant to so many people, was his kindness. We have lost, kindness is disappearing from this country, and it's sad. We can't disagree on anything, even something as relatively unimportant as a football game or a rivalry. We can't just disagree, shake hands, and go have a beer. It becomes battle stations. Everything becomes battle stations. Mike Slive had the unique ability, even if he disagreed with you, to be kind to you. That is an extraordinary thing, and it is becoming a lost art. And Anna mentioned that, and I read that, and it just, Ivana, when you read something or you hear something, it just really resonates with you. That resonated with me, and I thought, you know what? I need to tell my story. It's been 10 months. I went through it. I'm fine because I got tested. Let's see if we can maybe motivate someone else to do the same. And that's the heart of it. And so I'm exceptionally grateful to Anna Slive Harwood, Mike Slive's daughter, for her inspiration in really sparking me to write that column.
Well, Kevin, you shouldn't feel anything other than pride in sharing your story and gratitude there. So, Kevin, tell us who should get tested for prostate cancer, when should they do it, and how should they do it?
Well, again, starting at the age of 40, if you're a man 40 or over, even if you're in good health, even if you've had no issues in that area, you have no symptoms, go get tested. You can go to your primary care physician when you hopefully you get an annual physical, and especially as you get older, and ask them to do a PSA test on your blood work. It is not painful. Like I said, it's, they stick, you get the stick in the arm and they take some blood. They can do a test for your PSA levels, and that will give an indication if there's anything to be concerned about. And that's what happened with me. Like I said, there's a normal range of numbers that if you're between this number and that number, mine was so far above the normal range that it was a pretty strong indication something was amiss. And again, it prompted other tests. And so I did that. So if you're men over the age of 40, get tested. If you have a man over the age of 40 in your family, or you're friends with someone in that category, tell them to get tested. Don't take no for an answer. Urge them, encourage them. You will be glad you did.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for sharing your story here, for telling people how they can get tested as well. We will leave links here to the Mike Slive Foundation so you can learn more about that. We will leave links to the Lead, again, where you can subscribe to the Lead and get the weekly Sunday edition of the Lead that Kevin's column appears in. And we will also share you the link where you can read this column from yesterday. So a lot of things coming your way here, a lot of information there that you can learn more about this. Again, Kevin, thank you so much for sharing your story, for going public about your battle here, and that we're glad you're healthy, glad to see you today, and glad that you are again sharing that story.
Ivana, thank you so much for the opportunity. I've really appreciated it. Thank you.
Thanks again, everybody watching. Thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.